Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the second segment of our True Talk Thursday podcast. We're going to continue the conversation with José Muñoz and Maria Armstrong to discuss how zip codes are the driving factor in equities and what can be done on the local, state, and federal level to change that. And so I'll turn to Maria. Take it away.
So, Jose, you were talking about what determines like where you can create this community school, and that, you've got to be willing to lose your leadership, but you got to be also willing to put in the effort. And you were about to share with us that something awesome was happening out in Indiana.
Yeah. So what they call in Indiana, they have what they call a big table.
Okay.
You ever heard of the thing, form follows function?
Absolutely. That's Frank Lloyd Wright, baby.
There you go.
Frank Lloyd Wright.
With that concept, form follows function.
That's right.
So the functions, I'll give you the alliteration of the next iteration for community schools. So really, communication, collaboration, coordination. Okay,
Nice.
So communication is a two-way street. Communication is not like I talk, I present, and you listen. Communication is a two-way street. So you have to create a cadence, use some football terms, create a cadence where there's consistent communication. In Indiana, they have a big table where anybody can come whenever they come. We have the same thing in Albuquerque with our community schools. So create that vehicle. Then from what you hear, you begin to identify the points of collaboration. Who does what by when? Who can do it by when? So that could be a partner, that can be a parent, whoever that is. One example, a group of 14 Spanish-speaking moms who aren't allowed to work in the United States partnered together 2 years with the support of their school and community, got their associate's degree in early childhood, worked with the University of New Mexico School of Law, started their own early childhood preschool co-op.
Love it.
Isn't that funny? You can't work, but you can own a business.
Yeah.
You can employ people, but you can't get employed yourself. But that's how they got paid. So collaboration. So it took a lot of collaboration to happen, but it also takes a little project management, which we call coordination. So in a community school, it is somebody, and we haven't found yet where it's done well without a full-time person. Part-time gives you part-time results. So if you want to go all in, you go full-time. And that person's job is to organize and coordinate the communication, collaborations, and coordination as what we call the community school coordinator. So wherever the start is, you don't necessarily have to go in there with the answer, with the solution. You have to go in there with the will.
Yeah.
If you do that, you're in a good path.
We were talking about like where would be a great spot, and you mentioned, there's you can throw out a zip code, and that zip code has, a story behind it. And I was just having a conversation the other day about, reputations within communities stick a long time.
Right.
And that's I'm thinking that's probably what you were talking about. It's like, it really does change the perception, but it starts from within. It's within the community that it starts to change that reputation on outward, right? So in a community school setting, do you find that they glom onto like a specific kind of theme that they center around, and they're noted for that? Or what are some of the elements of that?
Well,
what does that look like?
Typically how it starts is that there's something we want to change. And because it's school, it's its last name, what tells us, lived experiences come together in place through children. But in a community school, adults come together for children. And so when we use the data of who's missing, who's hurting, who's failing academically, who's not doing so well, that is a great indicator and a great starting place of who to actually talk to.
Yeah.
The young people themselves, their parents, because there's greater circumstances there. And typically what you find is that we want to make a change in our life. And so if you start on that, I don't know if that answered your question, give it to me again. But I think that is going back to starting places. So themes, that's what it was. Themes you talked about. So it's mainly around something we want to change, and we can quantify that change. So you already know I'm an athlete. And so we look at numbers all the time. We have one goal every year. How many professions can you name?
Exactly.
Where you have one goal, and it's an all or nothing goal. It's not a baby step goal. That's what get coaches fired and players cut.
I love it. Yeah.
It is win the championship or go home. And we prepare ourselves religiously to do the same activities, but be nimble enough to change when change is presented. Mm-hmm. So same philosophy. The one goal is for every child to make it through there successfully. And there are steps along the way that are taken in the home. There are steps along the way that are taken in the neighborhood that have tremendous impact on the outcome of the end result of the game, the championship. So yes, the data could point to us of who to talk to, but it shouldn't. I would caution using that as the sole source of victory. That's just a step. That's a yards per carry, yards per catch, how many tackles you got. That's that type of data.
Yeah, stats.
But the end goal is that a child walks out there with their head lifted high because they feel successful. We didn't deem them successful because they feel successful, because that's what's going to carry them on in life. I dare the people on this call to start talking about your grade point averages when you were younger, especially when you struggle. Talk about when we stress out at work.
Yeah.
When I went through a divorce and I was a professional, that was probably the worst working time of my life. I was stressed out. So think about it in that context.
Sense. Yeah.
The end goal is for our children and their families to walk through life with their head up and have the responsibility to contribute back.
Excellent.
The other data, that's the data we collect in the game. It gives us indicators if we're on the right path to that.
Exactly. And should be viewed as that. That's one of the, in education, sometimes it's like we lean too much to the left or lean too much to the right on how we look at data, right? And then and instead of just, saying, this is what this is for, there's purpose behind it. And if it's an indicator, it's just that's its sole purpose.
If my purpose is that kids have high GPAs or great attendance, then I'm really short-sighted.
Yep.
I can't see the long-term vision.
Exactly.
My mom taught for 33 years. So she didn't get her degree until in her 30s. So she not only worked 2 jobs, she went to school and became a teacher.
I'm gonna have to meet her. It sounds like we have similar paths.
Well, my wife just took her to Home Depot. She begged to get out of the house while I was on this call. She goes,
she knew to scoot.
But you learn a lot from those circumstances, and I think kids. Yeah. Well, I think kids and us as adults, we don't make it in spite of our circumstances. We make it because of them. We learn a lot of grind and grit, but also when I talk about my childhood, you said there's a lot to learn in there. It raised my level of responsibility to contribute back to my community.
Yeah, you got it. Yep.
That's the end goal. I made the end goal.
Yep.
Speaking of somebody else's goal, I should say. I was probably their project.
There you go. Yeah. Especially when you have a community wrapping their arms around you, right?
Yes, this knucklehead of you, right?
Part of those the data, part of those numbers. Can you talk a little bit about around how many community schools do we have now? Like, how long has this been going on to where? And the reason I asked that is because I worked at a high school, one of the high schools that I was a principal, and we considered ourselves a community hub of a school, and it was designed that way by the community, and we wanted to have opportunities for kids to be able to really engage in the sciences, the healthcare, because there, a lot of our folks didn't have health insurance, and they thought if we could provide that wraparound service at the school where they're not being questioned, and it was housed by doctors would take turns coming and spending time there. That's why I asked about themes. But sometimes people, we considered ourselves a community school, but there are certain factors that qualify a community school from your standpoint, right?
Yeah. So oftentimes, so back to what you say, how many community schools and how long? Well, 1902, John Dewey had the idea. He didn't really get nothing really got going until 1911, the first high school out in New York, where they started calling community school type work. The coalition itself has been around for 22 years right now. So
22.
There are estimates of 5,000 plus. I'm a one, proof is in the pudding. So right now I have, I think 997 names we're still collecting that are serving just over 600,000 something students and just under 400 zip codes. So, you know that. So
there you go.
I'm looking at the data, looking at that data because I got an end game, right?
That's right.
I have an end game. So that's where we are right now. But I say that also because what you talk about, there are so many places that are operating as a community school and don't call it that.
Mm-hmm.
What we encourage is to people to name it, because that helps us to be on the same team when we start advocating together. However, the certain components, oftentimes coming into this role 3 years ago, the wraparound service stigma. I should say, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we stop at the base, the bottom.
Yep.
And what community schools do is begin to build that actual pyramid to the self-actualization, where children are actually walking out, parents are actually.
That's a great point.
We stop at that. So we don't put in like, yes, we got you. We're helping you through your stress moment, food, housing, clothing, health, mental health, all that stuff. But what do you aspire? You ever think about going back to school? You want to get a job? Why don't we put that stuff, make it accessible to you in your own neighborhood? We did some work with the state workforce solutions, Department of Workforce Solutions, where they actually funded the community school coordinator at a high school, and then parachuted their staff around that community school and begin to work with the coordinator to mobilize and organize all the businesses around that area, so that people didn't have to travel far to go to work, that they were getting workforce development at the school, and mass interviews, job fairs. I say job fairs, but it was more frequent than that. These were relationship building opportunities where they ate dinner together, and these were conversations. Say, you know what, I think you'd be perfect in this role. Why don't you come work for me? And so we started thinking about, but let me ask you this. We talk about in any zip code right now, name a public building, name any building, even a church. And you see, I'm churched up, even a church. Name another building that has more communication power than a public school. Within a zip code, you have one or more public schools that have contact with the majority of the population around that neighborhood, at least. If you did nothing but 180 days, that's 40% of the year.
Yeah.
You have the greatest communication vehicle to make change. How are you going to use it?
Absolutely. Man, you talk about teeing up. So you might be the football player, but I like to use a stick and a little ball. And so when I play golf, I like teeing things up, and you teed up our next segment. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come right back.
You got it.
Hey there, and don't forget, if you like what you hear and want to gain some more insight into what school districts are facing now, then tune in every Thursday at 7 p.m. or subscribe below. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great night.